Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. They told us no one had made it past the third night. Not the rangers, not the locals, not the nutcases who thought they were above fear. 3 nights was the rule, spoken in low voices by campfire light, like a dare whispered just before the power cuts out. We thought it was just local superstition. You know, the kind of thing people say to scare off tourists or keep teenagers from doing something stupid. But what we didn't know, what we couldn't know, was how true it all was. If I had turned back that first night, when we heard the scream from the woods, that didn't sound like it came from any person or animal, I might still be able to sleep with the lights off. But I didn't. We didn't. It started as a trip between 4 friends. Just 4 of us trying to reconnect after too many months of deadlines, double shifts, and slowly growing apart. Me, Ely, and then there was Carter, my best friend since we were 8. He's the guy who always thinks he's the smartest in the room, even when he's dead wrong. His girlfriend. Michelle came along because she always did. She had this quiet, observant way about her, like she noticed things the rest of us didn't. And finally, there was Jonah, the wild card. If Carter was the brain, Jonah was the spark. Funny, reckless, the one who always pushed things a little too far. We picked Black Pines because of its isolation. No reception, no tourists, no lights for miles. It was the kind of place where your thoughts echo too loudly, and you start to feel the forest watching you instead of the other way around. The first day was normal. It almost lulled us into thinking we'd found a hidden paradise. We set up camp by the lake, roasted hot dogs over the fire, drank too much cheap beer, laughed until we couldn't breathe. There were moments I wanted to bottle up and keep forever. But then the sun went down, and everything changed. It started with the silence. Not the kind you find in nature. That's never truly quiet. Forests are alive, and they hum with sounds: rustling leaves, chirping insects, birds calling to each other. But this was nothing. Like someone had thrown a blanket over the world, like even the wind was holding its breath. We were sitting around the fire when it hit us. "Do you hear that?" Michelle had asked, her voice low, almost like she didn't want to break something fragile. "Hear what?" Jonah replied, already halfway through another beer. "Exactly," she said. "There's nothing." And she was right. Not a cricket, not a bird. Even the leaves had gone still. Then came the scream. It wasn't human. I need to make that clear. It had this pitch to it, too high and too long to come from any person. And yet, it sounded like someone in pain, screaming for help, screaming like their lungs were tearing apart. It came from the trees, deep, far enough that you couldn't see the source, but close enough that you could feel it in your bones. None of us moved. Carter was the first to break the silence. "Probably a coyote or something," he said, a little too quickly. "They make weird noises, right?" "No way that was an animal," Jonah said. "Sounded like a person. A very screwed up person," Michelle added, her eyes still fixed on the dark wall of forest behind us. I wanted to agree with her. I wanted to say what we were all thinking. But instead, I just poked the fire with a stick and tried to act like my hands weren't shaking. That night, none of us slept much. We stayed close to the fire, all pretending we weren't listening for more screams. There were none, just that silence, that wrong kind of silence. The next morning, we talked ourselves out of the fear. Probably some animal, a one-time thing, maybe a fox, Carter offered, and somehow we all accepted that. Because it was easier than the alternative, that we were being watched. That something had screamed because it wanted us to hear. We went hiking that day, trying to prove we were fine. Michelle brought her camera, and we took turns posing at the edge of the lake and beneath twisted old trees. Even laughed a little. It felt good, normal, even. Until Jonah found the tree. It was just off the trail, half hidden behind a cluster of pines. Huge, at least 30 feet tall, and completely dead, but still standing. Its bark was scorched black like it had been in a fire, though nothing else around it was burned. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the carvings. Dozens of them. Names, dates, symbols we didn't recognize, all etched deep into the bark. Some were new, others so old they'd nearly vanished into the wood. Michelle snapped a photo of the markings, but her camera glitched, froze on the preview screen before shutting off completely. Maybe it's cursed. Jonah joked, kicking the roots. Black pine special. But something about the tree made my stomach twist. It wasn't just the way it looked. It was the way it felt. Like it was hiding something. Like it was listening. Later, back at camp, we found something worse. A tent. Not ours. Half collapsed, dirty, its fabric torn in places. We found it deeper in the woods, maybe 30 yards from where we'd set up. There were clothes scattered inside. A sleeping bag. A journal soaked from the rain and unreadable. No one nearby. No sign of a fire. No footsteps. Nothing. It's probably old, Carter said, his voice tight. Left behind by some hiker. But Michelle found a granola bar inside the tent. Still sealed. With an expiration date from last month. We called out. Waited. Searched around the area. Nothing. No gear, no food wrappers, no shoes. Just the tent. Sitting there like it had been forgotten on purpose. That night, the scream came back. Only this time, it was closer. And louder. We were frozen around the fire when it happened. The scream tore through the night like it had teeth. It was deeper than before, but it still had that awful, stretched sound. Like a voice being dragged out of someone. Then it stopped, and something whispered from the trees. I wish I could tell you what it said. I really do. But it wasn't a language. It wasn't even words. Just sounds. Breathless, broken sounds. Like someone trying to speak through water. Michelle dropped her marshmallow stick and stood up. We need to leave, she said, her face pale. Tomorrow. First light. And for once, no one argued. But we didn't make it. Because that night Jonah vanished. His tent was zipped shut from the outside. His boots were gone. No footprints. No noise. Just gone. Like he'd been plucked out of the world. We searched for hours, screaming his name into the trees, stumbling through brush, breaking sticks as we went. But the forest never gave him back. When the sun came up, we found his watch, wrapped around the lowest branch of that scorched black tree, still ticking, and beside it, freshly carved into the bark, was his name. Geonazar 4206025, the same day he disappeared. We left that morning. No questions. No arguments. Just packed up and got the hell out. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Because when I got home and looked through the photos on Michelle's camera, I found something that didn't belong. A shot of the four of us by the lake. But in the background was a fifth figure, standing just behind us, half hidden in the trees. Tall, too tall. Its face was nothing but darkness. And worst of all, it was smiling. The quiet that followed the scream was worse than the scream itself. You don't realize how loud silence can get until it closes in on you like that. Thick, pressing against your eardrums, forcing your breath to sound like it's coming from a mile away. We stood still. Nobody said a word. It wasn't just fear. It was confusion wrapped in disbelief, with a thin coating of hope that maybe, just maybe, we imagined it. But we didn't. We all heard it. Kayla's face went pale as she instinctively stepped closer to me, and I could feel her fingers trembling as they curled around my arm. Jamal and Derek were frozen too, eyes wide, looking past me toward the woods in the direction the scream came from. Or at least, where we thought it came from. Someone's out there, Jamal said. His voice was rough, like he had to drag it out from the pit of his chest. That was a person, right? It sounded like a person, but something about it had been off. Too high-pitched at first, then cut off too cleanly, like it had been stopped, snatched. "We need to check it out," Derek said. That one sentence felt like striking a match in a room full of gas. We all turned to him. "Are you serious?" Kayla hissed. "We don't know what that was. What if it's some animal, or some psycho messing with us?" "I don't think animals scream like that," Jamal said quietly. Derek was already pulling his flashlight from his backpack. "If someone's out there and hurt, we can't just leave them. What if it was a woman? Or a kid?" I looked toward the trees. Pitch black dense, barely a whisper of wind. Every branch looked like a crooked arm. "What if it's not someone who needs help?" I asked. "What if they're trying to lure us out?" Derek hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough to know the thought had wormed its way into his head, too. And then it happened again. Another scream, this time closer. It wasn't the same as before. It had changed, lower, cracked, like whoever it was had been screaming for too long already. But still, it wasn't just pain. There was something else buried in the sound: panic. Like whoever it was didn't just hurt, they knew something was coming for them. "Okay," Jamal said, swallowing hard. "That sounded real, like real. I think we should." Snap! A branch, right behind our tent. Kayla gasped and turned, and I instinctively shoved her behind me. The flashlight in Derek's hand jerked toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on nothing. Just empty trees, shifting shadows. "I swear I heard something," Derek whispered. His light scanned the forest floor again, slower this time. It sounded like snap, crack, another step, then a soft sound. Almost too quiet to notice. Breathing. It was just beyond the trees, just deep enough into the shadows that we couldn't see the source. But we all heard it. A slow, ragged inhale. And then nothing. No exhale. Just a long pause, like something was holding its breath. Then the air shifted. The shadows moved. And that's when we saw it. 2 eyes. Glowing. Faintly yellow. Not like a flashlight reflection. Not like an animal. It was like they had their own glow, dim but undeniable. And they weren't low to the ground. They were high. Too high for a person. Too still for a bear. And they were looking right at us. "Nope," Jamal said, backing away. "We need to go back to the car. Right now." We all nodded. Moving together, not turning our backs but stepping away slowly. But we didn't make it far. Because when we turned to face the way back down the trail, the car wasn't there. The path we took was gone. What had been a clear dirt trail 20 minutes earlier was now just more trees. Dense. Unbroken. Like no one had ever walked through them. "What the?" I stepped forward and turned in a circle. "This isn't right. It's supposed to be right there. You sure we didn't turn around?" Derek asked, clearly trying to keep calm. "No, I'm sure. This is where we came from. We didn't turn. There was one trail. One way in. The car was right there. But it wasn't. And no matter how far we walked, we couldn't find it. We searched for 20 minutes, then 30. Our phones still had no signal. The air was thick, and the night had gotten quiet. Too quiet. The usual sounds of a forest at night, crickets, owls, rustling leaves, were gone, replaced by nothing, not silence. Dead air, and then we found the cabin. It was small, old, hidden behind a thicket of gnarled bushes that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. The wooden siding was cracked, the door hanging slightly ajar. The roof sagged in the middle like it had taken too many hits from falling branches or snow. "Was this here before?" Kayla asked. "No," I said. "It wasn't." But there it was. We approached it slowly. No footprints around it. No signs of life. But something about it felt recent, like it had been used, or was still being used. Jamal reached out and gently pushed the door open. It creaked like every horror movie cliché, but that didn't make it any less real. Inside was a single room, a broken table, 2 chairs, a fireplace that hadn't seen flames in years. And on the far wall, dozens of deep scratches, like something had clawed at the wood, desperate to get out. Then we noticed the floor. There was a rug in the center of the room, old, moth-eaten, covered in dust. Derek stepped forward and nudged it with his boot. A trapdoor. Is that? Kayla started. Yeah, I said. It is. We all stared at it. Why would a trapdoor be in the middle of nowhere? Jamal asked. Maybe it's a cellar, Derek said, though he didn't sound convinced. People used to hide stuff underground. Tools, food. Whatever. He knelt down and grabbed the rusted handle. Don't, Kayla whispered, but he pulled. It opened with a groan, and the smell that hit us was sharp and sour, like rotting earth and old water. Derek shined his light down. Stairs. Stone ones, winding into the dark. Guys, Jamal said suddenly, turning toward the doorway. Where's the door? It was gone. It was there but shut. None of us had touched it. And now, standing in front of it, was something that had not been there before. A figure, tall, still, almost blending into the shadows, like it wasn't made of flesh but of the dark itself. No face, no features, just watching, or waiting. I felt the trapdoor pulse in the floor like it had a heartbeat of its own. Then something moved beneath it. Something knocked once, twice. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite human, we heard it from the hole below. Come down. You're already in. Derek slammed the trapdoor shut, and we stumbled back. The thing in the doorway was gone. Not walked away. Not faded. Just gone. Kayla was shaking now. This isn't real. This isn't real. But it was. We were trapped. In a cabin that didn't exist before. On a trail that vanished behind us. In woods that didn't make sense. And beneath our feet, something was knocking. Still knocking. Always knocking. That was just the first night, and it was only going to get worse. None of us slept that night. We tried. We really did. After Derek slammed the trapdoor shut, we barricaded it with the old table and both chairs. Stacking them on top like that would actually stop something. It felt ridiculous, like taping a band-aid over a hole in a sinking ship, but it was all we had. That and the fireplace poker Derek gripped so tightly his knuckles turned white. The glow from the flashlight was starting to die. Its beam dimmed every few minutes, flickering like it was running out of power or willpower or both. The knock came again around 3 a.m. soft, measured, not like fists, like fingers, long ones. Knock. Knock. Then silence again. Kayla was curled next to me on the floor, her head pressed against my chest. I don't think she cried. There were no tears left. Just shudders, one after the other. Like her body had given up but didn't know how to shut off. Jamal sat against the far wall, knees pulled up to his chest, muttering to himself. He wasn't praying, exactly. Just mumbling like he needed to fill the quiet before it filled him. Derek stayed closest to the trapdoor, his eyes locked on it like if he blinked, something would burst through. At some point, we must have all drifted into half-sleep. Not really resting, just hovering, dreaming with our eyes open. And then there was the whisper. Not from below this time, from the walls. We couldn't make out words at first, just the sound of it. Dry. Brittle, like leaves being crushed underfoot. But the more we listened, the more it took shape. Help me. I jerked upright. Please, down here. It wasn't the same voice that told us to come down. This one was scared, weak, human. I looked at the others. They heard it too. I whispered. Kayla nodded. Jamal stood up an inch toward the trapdoor, but Derek stopped him with a hand on his chest. Don't, Derek said, voice hoarse. That's not real. It sounds real, Jamal said. It could be someone trapped. Maybe they... He cut off. A thump. Not from the trapdoor. From upstairs. But there was no upstairs. We looked up and saw the ceiling sag. Just for a second, like something heavy had moved across it. This is insane, Kayla said, barely louder than a breath. I stood, stepping toward the center of the room. This cabinet wasn't here. We walked past this area 3 times. Derek nodded slowly. There's no way we missed it. It's not even visible unless you're standing right here. So how the hell is it here now? Jamal asked. Did it move? Or did we? That silence again. The kind that sinks its teeth into your spine. We need to leave, Kayla said. Before the sun comes up, while we still can. We waited until the first crack of dawn. The light didn't pour in like it should have. It leaked. Pale, sickly, like it was being filtered through dirty water. But it was enough to see outside. We opened the cabin door. The forest was different. I don't mean just darker or quieter. I mean the trees were different. Thicker. Taller. Old. Too old. Covered in hanging moss and bark that looked scorched in places. There were symbols carved into some of them. Strange, looping things that didn't belong to any language I recognized. They looked like eyes, circles within circles, always watching. We stepped outside cautiously, expecting the door to slam shut behind us. It didn't. But when I glanced back, the cabin was gone. Just like that. Gone. What the hell? Derek whispered. It was right there. Kayla cried. Now it was just trees again. No clearing. No space where a building could have stood. The underbrush was unbroken. No footprints, no debris, not even disturbed leaves. It was like we'd never been inside at all. And that's when we found the first piece of clothing. A sock. Dirty, torn, half buried beneath a root like the forest had tried to eat it. Someone else was here, Jamal said. Staring at it, we walked a little further and found a shoe. A child's sneaker, laces knotted, muddy and stiff. Then a ripped tee, shirt hanging from a low branch, faded from sun and rain. The more we moved, the more we found. A broken camera, a crushed water bottle, a moldy sleeping bag with something inside it. We didn't unzip it. We didn't want to know. They didn't get out, Derek muttered. None of them did. That was when I noticed something worse. The forest had changed again. It wasn't letting us walk in a straight line. We tried, over and over, used trees as markers. We even tied strips of Derek's extra flannel around trunks to track our movement. But no matter how we moved, we always ended up back where we started. Always at the same burnt stump. The one with the scorched bark that looked like a human face screaming. We're not lost, I said aloud, heart racing. We're trapped, like rats in a maze. Then I noticed something carved into the stump. Small, nearly hidden beneath the burn marks. A word. Stay. Kayla backed away from it like it burned her. That's a warning, she said. It has to be. Derek shook his head. Or a command. We were starting to fall apart. That's when the tree started bleeding. I'm not making that up. We heard a creak behind us, like wood groaning, and turned to see one of the older trees leaking. Thick, dark liquid oozing from a crack in the trunk. It wasn't sap. It was too red, too viscous. It dripped slowly, pooling at the base. And then, with a pop like a joint snapping, the tree shifted, like it turned to watch us. We ran, blind, stupid, just ran. We didn't care where anymore, just away. Branches clawed at our faces. Vines wrapped around our ankles. The forest fought us like a living thing. But somehow, miraculously, we broke through a thicket of brambles and found ourselves. At our campsite. Exactly as we left it. Chairs tipped over. Coolers scattered. Fire burned out. But the tent was different. It was zipped shut. It wasn't when we left it. Jamal crept toward it and reached for the zipper. Don't, I said. But he already was. He pulled it down slowly, the sound loud in the dead air. Inside was someone's backpack. Not one of ours. Old. Faded. Covered in a thin layer of dust. Jamal pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a journal. And a map. The cover of the journal was cracked leather. The name inside, Colin M. Raker. We didn't know who that was. The first few pages were mundane. Notes about hiking trails. A list of supplies. Then the handwriting changed. Sloppier. Hasty. pages torn. Something is wrong with this forest. I've been walking in circles for 3 days. Compass is useless. Sun never stays in the same place. Heard screams last night. Sounded like me. The trees move. I swear they move. I saw someone yesterday, waving from behind a tree, but when I got close, it was me. Don't go underground. Whatever it is, it feeds on you knowing it's there. Then the last entry, Sabin showed up again. 3rd time. I think it likes me. If anyone finds this, don't stay. Not after dark. Not even for a minute. We all stared at the page. Think he got out? Kayla asked. I didn't answer. Because on the back of the map was something even worse. A drawing, crude, sketched in pencil. A stick figure standing in the middle of a forest surrounded by eyes. Dozens, hundreds. And above them, floating a shape, tall, thin. Antlers sprouting from its head like twisted branches. No face, just void. At the bottom of the page, one word written in trembling ink. It watches. The sky was darkening again. Daylight didn't last here, and we weren't alone. We stared at the drawing on the back of the map for what felt like hours. None of us spoke. Not at first. What could we say? That we'd seen it too. That some part of us already knew it was real, even before we saw the sketch. The thing with the antlers. It had been watching us since we got here. Derek was the first to move. He folded the map, stuffed the journal back into the strange backpack, and zipped it shut. We're getting out of here, he said, voice hard. No more exploring, no more talking. We pick a direction and move until we hit something. Road, river, anything. But the trees. Jamal started. Don't care, Derek snapped. We'll stay here, we die. We all agreed we dozed what was left of the cold campfire and left everything behind. The tent, the sleeping bags, even the cooler with our food. We didn't want anything that might slow us down or make us look back. The sun hadn't even reached its peak when we started walking. At first, we moved fast. Too fast. It was like we were being chased, but the worst part was, nothing was following us. Not yet, but something was ahead. Every now and then we'd see shapes between the trees. Just movement. Always distant, too far to make out. But they were tall, thin. Sometimes they had antlers, and always they disappeared the second we turned to look directly at them. Around midday, we found a clearing. We should have been relieved. We weren't. The grass was dead, crushed flat like something had lain there for a long time. In the center was a mound of dirt, freshly dug. A single wooden post stood beside it, and nailed to the post was a tattered Polaroid. It was a photo of 4 people. 2 men, 2 women, smiling, posing in front of a tent. They weren't us, but they could have been. Young, happy, clueless. Someone had written a word across the photo in thick, black marker. Aryan. That's when the screaming started. It came from the trees. High-pitched, terrified. Human. It was a man's voice, screaming over and over again. Help! Please! I just got ma. We froze. Derek turned toward the sound. It could be someone else, he said. Someone still alive. Or it's bait, Kayla said quietly. But Jamal was already running. Jamal! I yelled. Stop! He didn't. We chased him. No choice. Couldn't let him disappear. The forest seemed to close in tighter around us with every step. Branches snagged our clothes. Thorns ripped at our skin. The air got thick, wet, like trying to breathe through cloth. And the screaming kept going. Then suddenly silence. Jamal was gone. We stumbled into another clearing, this one smaller. Just enough space for a few fallen logs and some stones arranged in a circle. At the center was a pile of bones. They were picked clean. Small, animal-like, but with fingers. One of them wore Jamal's hoodie. Kayla sank to her knees. No. He was right ahead of us. He's not dead, I said, but I didn't believe it. He's not. Derek turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning the woods. It's playing with us, he muttered, like a cat with mice. We heard breathing, not ours, heavy, Close. We didn't wait to see where it came from. We ran again. Blind. Branches whipped past us. The forest shifted. I swear it did. Paths that weren't there suddenly opened. Others disappeared behind us. I looked up at one point and realized the sky had turned black. Not dark. Black, like the forest had swallowed the sun. And then, for just a second, I saw it. The thing. It stood between two trees taller than both. Its limbs were too long. Its arms reached nearly to the ground. Antlers spread from its head like jagged branches, draped in moss and old skin. It didn't have a face, just a void. A hole. A black pit where a head should have been. And from that hole, I could hear whispering. Not voices. Thoughts. I see you. I see what you did. I turned away and ran harder. We collapsed when we finally found water, a river. Thin, winding, but moving. That's what mattered. Flow meant direction. Flow meant escape. We follow it. Derek panted. Rivers lead out. They always lead out. We walked for hours. The trees changed again, thinner now. More space between them. We started seeing signs of life, birds, a rabbit, normal stuff. Kayla started to hope. I think we're close, she whispered. I think we made it. Then she stopped. Dead still. Kayla, I asked. She pointed. Ahead on the riverbank was a tent, a red one, identical to ours. I felt the cold creep back in. No, Derek said. No way. We stepped closer. There was our cooler, our torn chair, our footprints. It was our campsite, the one we left, the one we walked away from hours ago. We'd gone in a full circle. Again. But it wasn't exactly how we left it. There was someone sitting in the camp chair now, their back to us. Dressed like us. Same hoodie as Jamal. But it couldn't be him. Because his head was turned all the way around. Not twisted, not broken. Just wrong, like it had grown that way. The figure stood and smiled, not with a mouth. It didn't have one. The smile was in our heads. Found you. That's when the forest screamed. Every tree, every rock, the ground beneath us. A single, deafening sound, like the world ripping open. We ran without thinking. And the last thing I remember before everything went black was the figure taking a step toward us. Then silence. I woke up to rain. Cold and thin, like the sky was bleeding. My head ached. My mouth was dry. I was lying in mud, half covered in pine needles, my clothes soaked through. For a moment, I thought it was all a dream, some horrible hallucination brought on by dehydration or panic. Then I sat up. Kayla was beside me, her eyes wide open. She wasn't blinking. Kayla. No answer. I reached for her hand. It was ice cold. But when I touched her, she blinked. Once, then turned to me. Her eyes didn't look right. They weren't scared. Just empty. Like something was missing. Then Derek groaned from a few feet away. He was alive too, somehow. But we were no longer in the forest. Not the same forest. This one was quiet. Normal. Sunlight trickled through the leaves. Birds chirped. I could hear the soft trickle of a creek nearby. We were out. We were out. I don't understand, Derek said, sitting up. What happened? I don't know, I said. We ran. There was someone at the camp. Jamal, or whatever was pretending to be him. He winced. That noise. Like metal grinding through my skull. Then we looked at Kayla, still staring, still silent. Her pupils were huge, drenched in black. Kayla, I said, crouching beside her. Well, I made it out, okay. We're okay now. Slowly, she turned her head to me. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something. But what came out wasn't her voice. It was a whisper, the same one I'd heard in my head back in the woods. You left the door open. She blinked once, then collapsed. I screamed. Derek checked her pulse. She's alive. Just unconscious. I didn't know what to do. Call for help, run for a road. Then I heard something behind us. A sound I'll never forget. A second set of footsteps. But they weren't right. They were heavy, wet, like something dragging its limbs through the dirt. We turned, but there was nothing, just trees. Wind. And yet, the feeling was back. That presence. Like something was standing just outside the edges of what we were allowed to see. We got Kayla up between us and walked. No direction. Just away. Eventually, after what felt like hours, we hit a trail. Dirt and gravel. Well, traveled. Tire tracks, candy wrappers. A place with rules. Civilization. By dusk we saw lights, cabins. We nearly cried. The ranger station was small, empty, but the radio still worked. We called for help. An ambulance came. A sheriff. EMTs. They took Kayla away on a stretcher. Said she was in shock. They asked us what happened. We lied. Said we got lost. Panic. Dehydration. Delirium. No one asked more questions. Just relief that we were alive. We spent the night in a clinic 2 towns over. Derek didn't sleep. Neither did I. In the morning, I woke up to find him gone. No note. No phone call. Nothing. I checked with the nurses. He'd checked himself out before sunrise. I haven't seen him since. But that's not the worst part. The worst part came a week later. Kayla recovered. Physically, at least. But something in her broke. She won't talk about the forest. She won't talk about what happened in that last moment when we blacked out. Sometimes she hums to herself. A tune I don't recognize. Slow and low. Like a lullaby from somewhere wrong. I moved back home. Started seeing a therapist. Tried to convince myself that it was trauma. That my brain was inventing things to make sense of fear. But 3 nights ago, I woke up to a sound. A scratch on my window. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor. I told myself it was the wind, until I saw the muddy handprint, pressed against the glass. 5 fingers, too long, too thin, and in the center of the palm, drawn in dried dirt, was a single word, OPN. I haven't slept since. Something came back with us. Something we didn't see. Something we brought out. And now, it's looking for the others. I tried to tell myself it was a prank. That some local kids had climbed up to my window with a ladder. Maybe someone heard about our little rescue story and decided to mess with me. But that handprint was wrong. Too detailed. The smudges in the fingers weren't streaks. They were ridges. Like the skin was stretched too tight over bone. There were tiny cracks around the edges, like the dirt had dried into place. Baked onto it. And the word OPN wasn't just written in the dirt. It was scratched into the condensation of the window from the inside. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I scrubbed the window clean and bought cameras. 2 for the outside, 1 in my hallway, another in the living room, just in case. Then I called Derek. Still nothing. I left a voicemail. Tried his socials. Tried one of his old gamer tags. All gone, like he never existed. That night, I watched the cameras obsessively, set them to record. Motion sensors on. Nothing happened. Just static and the occasional flicker from headlights outside. But on the 3rd night, things changed. It started with the smell. Rotting leaves, wet wood, mold. Like something from deep in the woods had soaked into the drywall. Then I heard it. The slow creak of a footstep on the stairs. I froze. I live alone. There's only one way into my apartment, and the door was locked, deadbolt and chain. Another step. Kriak. I grabbed the bat from under my bed and turned on every light I could reach. Then I opened my bedroom door, and there it was. Mud. One perfect footprint. At the top of the stairs, facing my room. The shape was human, but the toes were wrong. Like they'd been broken, bent. One of them had too many joints. I backed away. Slammed the door, called the police. They found nothing, no forced entry, no prints, no signs of anyone else in the house. They asked if I'd been drinking, or taking anything. I told them I hadn't. They left with polite smiles and zero belief. But the camera saw something. When I checked the feed later that night, I found it. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the hallway camera caught a frame. Just one. A single flash. A silhouette. Something crawling up the stairs. But the limbs didn't bend like a person's. The elbows went the wrong way. The neck hung too low. Its head was tilted back like it was sniffing the air. No face. Just shadow and stringy hair. Then the screen went black, static, nothing more until sunrise. I packed a bag and left that morning, drove 3 hours to my parents' place. I told them I needed to get away. They didn't ask questions. I slept in my old room, locked the door, didn't touch the lights. The next morning, there was mud on the carpet, and the same words scratched into the mirror on the wall. Oh, Pin. I didn't tell my parents. What was I supposed to say? Hey, something from the woods followed me home. Tracked mud into your house, and it likes to write messages on mirrors. No, they'd think I was having a breakdown. Hell, I wasn't sure I wasn't. But that morning, I didn't shower. I didn't touch the mirror. I just wiped it clean with shaking hands and quietly asked if I could sleep on the couch instead of in my old room. They didn't ask why. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the hallway from the sofa, eyes dry and stinging, every creak in the house like a needle in my spine. At around 1:30 a.m., I saw it again. Not directly. Just the shape. The hallway was dark, but there was a thin crack of moonlight coming through the window. And something moved across it, not walking, dragging. Like it was pulling itself from the guest room across the floor. Slow, sticky, wet sounds following it like something leaking through the carpet. I didn't breathe, didn't move. I watched the silhouette vanish around the corner toward the back of the house. Then silence. 10 seconds. 30. A full minute. Then my phone lit up beside me. A notification from the camera app I'd installed on my home system, the one still set up in my apartment. Motion detected, living room. I stared at the notification. My apartment was 3 hours away. Another ping. Motion detected, hallway. Then a screenshot loaded. The frame was dark, glitched. But there, near the corner, was the shape, bent backward, arms too long, one hand resting on the camera like it knew. The eyes, if you could even call them that, were just black pits, not sockets, not even holes, just voids. It was smiling, but the skin didn't stretch right. It cracked at the corners like old leather. Teeth too uniform, too white. Another ping. Front door opened. I shut off the phone, turned it over. My hands were trembling. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't tied to a place. It was tied to me, and it didn't care how far I ran. At sunrise, I made up an excuse and left my parents' house. Back to my apartment. I thought, somehow, it might stop if I faced it, if I didn't run. But when I opened my front door, it smelled like the forest, wet bark, blood, and something deeper, like fungus rotting under old leaves. The apartment was freezing, and on my kitchen table was something that hadn't been there before, a bundle of sticks tied with old string. In the center, hair. Not mine, but I recognized it. It was Derek's. I didn't touch it. The bundle of sticks sat on the kitchen table like some kind of offering. Or a threat. Old twine wrapped around them 3 times, knotted with something that looked like sinew instead of string. And right in the center, tangled in the fibers, Derek's hair, wavy, blonde. A few strands crusted red at the ends. I didn't need a DNA test. I knew. He always ran his fingers through it when he was nervous. Same cowlick that stuck up on the left side. Same split ends he'd never stopped chewing when we were zoning out by the fire. And now it was here, in my home. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. Again and again. I tried texting, messaging, even checking his socials. Nothing, like he'd vanished. I don't remember lying down, just remember blinking, and it was dark out. The air had gotten colder. My breath fogged when I exhaled. That's when I noticed the noise. Whispering. So quiet, it could have been wind. But wind doesn't repeat words. And these were words I recognized. You left him. You left him. You left him. They were coming from inside the apartment. I moved slowly, heart pounding, toward the bathroom mirror, and there it was again, written in the same foggy, dripping streaks as before. You watched him die. No, I said out loud. That's not what happened, I tried. But the reflection moved. Not like a trick of the eye, Not a shadow. I moved left. The reflection stayed where it was. It was watching me. Head tilted. Blood leaking from the mouth like it had been chewing on glass. I backed away, nearly tripping over the coffee table. And right behind me, footsteps, fast ones. I spun around, empty room. Then I heard it, the front door. Not opening. Unlocking. Click. I ran to it, slammed the bolt shut. Even pushed a chair under the knob. But when I turned around again, the bundle of sticks was gone. In its place was a piece of paper. Crude. Torn from a journal. And in the center, written in charcoal, "You brought it back. And it's hungry." I stayed awake all night. Didn't even blink. The bundle of sticks disappearing was one thing. But the message, "You brought it back." No, that's not how this works. I didn't bring anything back. I just survived, didn't I? I needed proof I wasn't losing it. Something real. Something tangible. So I pulled up the trail cam footage. Weeks ago, when we first got to the campsite, Derek had set up a few motion, activated cams around the area, mostly to catch wildlife. He was always talking about making a montage for our YouTube channel that never existed. I found the SD card buried in my backpack, snapped it into the adapter, and opened the files. Most were empty. A squirrel here. A deer blinking into the lens there. Then, timestamp 3:42 a.m. date 2 nights before Derek vanished. The video was grainy, night vision. But I could still make it out. Derek stood about 15 feet from the tent. Barefoot, shirtless. Just standing there, staring into the woods. Then he walked in. No flashlight, no shoes, no reaction. Just disappeared into the black. I scanned ahead. Nothing for an hour. Then, another file. Timestamp 4:07 a.m. This time the camera caught movement from the other side of the trees. A figure, but not Derek. It was taller, thinner, like its arms were too long, knuckles nearly grazing the forest floor. It moved in bursts, twitching like broken stop motion. I paused the video, tried to breathe. I watched as it crept to the edge of the clearing, then stood up and smiled. Not a normal smile, too wide, like something trying to imitate one. It crouched low, sniffed the camera, then turned toward where Derek had vanished. Then it followed. But the last file, that one was new. Timestamp today, 3:19 a.m. It was a short clip, only 10 seconds. But I recognized the angle. It was inside my apartment, my living room, and in the center of the frame, facing directly into the lens, was me, asleep, snoring softly on the couch, behind me. In the shadows, something was watching. The morning after I watched that video, I couldn't get out of bed. My heart wouldn't stop racing, my fingers twitching. Like I was waiting for something, waiting for it to show up. It was the phone call that broke me. It came around noon, just as I was sitting in the dark, staring at the same video replaying over and over again. My phone buzzed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The number was unfamiliar, but I picked it anyway. "Hello," a breath on the other end. Then a voice, soft whispers. "I told you, you left him. You left him, now he's angry." I froze. A chill ran through me. The voice, something about it. It sounded like Derek, but off, like an echo of him. "Who is this?" I croaked. There was no response, just heavy breathing. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding. My hands were shaking. My brain refused to make sense of it. I should have known better. But the fear was real. It wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I could feel it in my bones, crawling beneath my skin. I tried calling back. The number was disconnected. No trace. Nothing. I sat in the silence. And then, the feeling hit me again. The one I'd tried to ignore, to bury. The sense that I wasn't alone in the room. I turned around. Nothing. Just the creeping shadows. But the message on my phone screen flashed again. Derek's name. It was a text. The message read, "Help me. Please. It's not what you think. Don't go back to the woods. You'll never leave if you do." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was happening? What was this? I needed answers. No more hiding. I had to face whatever this was. I grabbed my keys. grabbed my jacket. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe the police would have answers. Maybe someone could make sense of all of this. But before I left, I made one last attempt. I went back to the trail cam footage, hoping, praying there was something I'd missed, something I could hold on to. Then it hit me. In one of the earlier clips, at the exact moment Derek walked into the woods, I saw something else in the corner of the frame. Something I hadn't noticed before. A shadow. It wasn't cast by the trees, the firelight, or anything in the natural world. It moved on its own, as if it had no physical form at all. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Derek hadn't disappeared because of an accident. Derek hadn't left me because he wanted to. No. Something had taken him, and it was now coming for me. I barely slept that night. The phone call, the message, the footage, it all swirled in my mind like an unsolvable riddle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow watching Derek, moving with him. I needed to get to the bottom of this, and the only way to do that was to go back to the woods. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, 1,000 pounds of dread in my chest. But there was no other choice. Derek wasn't just missing, he was taken. I needed to find him, or at the very least, figure out what the hell was happening. The sun barely kissed the horizon when I loaded up the car. I didn't even tell anyone where I was going. I didn't know who to trust anymore, especially after that cryptic call. The drive was long, and the silence in the car was suffocating. My thoughts kept spiraling. What if Derek was still out there? What if he was alive but trapped, trying to warn me? And what was that shadow? I couldn't push the thought away. The longer I drove, the more that shadow seemed to grow in my mind, becoming larger, darker, watching me. When I finally arrived at the trailhead, the familiar weight of the forest hung in the air, thick and oppressive. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches creaking under the weight of something unseen. I stood at the edge of the forest, hesitating. The wind whispered through the leaves, a sound that almost sounded like voices. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the meaning. Danger. But I couldn't stop. I had to go. I strapped on my backpack, pulled out the map Derek had given me, and made my way down the trail, the dirt crunching beneath my boots. The path was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle, the silence stretching for too long. It didn't take long for the feeling to return, the feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, but it clung to me, tighter and tighter with each step. It felt like someone, or something, was walking just behind me, always out of sight, always just out of reach. I reached the clearing where Derek and I had set up camp, the place where he had first gone missing. The sight of it hit me like a punch to the stomach. The remnants of the campfire were still there, cold and blackened, like nothing had ever disturbed it. But it felt wrong. I could feel it. The air was too thick, too still. Suddenly, I heard something behind me, a rustle, a twig snapping. I whirled around, heart in my throat. Nothing. My eyes darted from tree to tree, every shadow playing tricks on me. Derek. I whispered, barely hearing my own voice over the deafening quiet. No answer. I stepped forward, trying to keep my composure, but every instinct was telling me to turn back, to run. But then I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the trees. It was tall, far too tall for a normal person, and its shape, it was wrong. It was almost like it wasn't human. My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I was frozen in place, every muscle in my body locked, as if my body knew something I didn't want to understand. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I could feel my breath coming in shallow gasps, my mind spiraling into panic. But then, just as quickly as I'd spotted it, the figure was gone. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? No. I wasn't imagining it. The smell hit me next. A heavy, metallic scent like blood mixed with something rotten. My stomach churned, and I gagged, trying to suppress the rising bile. I turned around and stumbled backward, my hands gripping the rough bark of a tree for support. That's when I saw it, a trail of footprints. But they weren't normal. They were wrong. The edges of each step seemed distorted, as if something was dragging itself through the dirt. The marks led deeper into the woods, further than I had ever gone before. I swallowed hard, the panic rising in my throat, but I knew I had to follow them. There was no turning back now. With every step, the forest seemed to grow darker, the trees closing in around me. The path narrowed, and the air grew thick with a sense of malice. And then, in the distance, I heard something, a voice. "Help me, please." It was faint, but unmistakable. The voice was soft, desperate. "Derek," I broke into a run, the leaves crunching underfoot as I barreled forward. The sound of Derek's voice pulled me deeper into the woods, urging me onward, pulling me toward the unknown. And that's when I saw it, a clearing almost hidden by the dense trees. In the center was a figure. It wasn't Derek. It was someone else. A woman. Her face was pale, her hair matted with dirt. Her body was slumped over, her arms stretched out like she was reaching for something or someone. She looked like she'd been there for a long time. Her eyes snapped open, and she looked directly at me. Her mouth moved, but the words didn't make sense. She wasn't speaking to me. She was screaming. The woman's eyes locked onto mine, wide and unblinking. The scream that came from her mouth was not just loud. It was piercing, a sound that rattled my bones and made my blood run cold. I froze. My legs turned to lead, as if some unseen force was holding me in place, forcing me to watch as her body jerked and twitched unnaturally. There was something wrong with her, her movements, her posture. It wasn't human, not anymore. For a moment, the forest around me seemed to disappear. The trees, the ground, the sky, all of it faded into a dull, empty blur. My attention was fixed solely on her. The way she stretched her arms, the way her mouth opened wider than any human's should. Then she stopped, completely. Her head tilted slightly to the side, her hollow, empty eyes never leaving mine. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine, and a wave of nausea hit me like a truck. I didn't know what to do. What was I supposed to do? This wasn't just some lost hiker. This wasn't just some strange woman wandering the woods. This thing was part of the mystery. It was part of the darkness that had taken Derek. I took a slow step back, trying not to make a sound. But every movement I made seemed to echo in the dead silence of the clearing. The sound of my boots crunching against the leaves like an alarm bell. Her mouth stretched open again, and this time she spoke. His waiting, just like I did. The words felt like a dagger in my chest. She wasn't just talking to me, she was warning me. "Who?" I whispered, my voice shaking. She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head further, like she was considering something. Then, in a sudden, violent motion, her body jerked forward, her limbs snapping in ways they shouldn't have been able to move. I barely had time to react. I turned and ran. I sprinted through the trees, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel her behind me, the sound of something, someone, scraping through the underbrush, closing in on me. The trail blurred before my eyes. The trees seemed to twist and shift, leading me deeper into the forest, farther from safety, farther from everything I knew. But then I stumbled. I fell to the ground, my palms scraping against the dirt as I tried to push myself up. My vision swam, and I could hear something moving just behind me. I dared a glance over my shoulder. The woman was standing there, not far from me, her face a mask of twisted agony. And then I saw it. A shape moving through the trees, larger and darker than anything I'd seen before. A shadow stretching out from the very ground itself. The air felt thick, suffocating, like it was closing in on me. Every breath felt like I was inhaling smoke. The weight of something ancient and powerful pressing down on me. It was him, the shadow in the forest, the one I'd seen before. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to process the terror that was flooding my senses. I ran again, harder this time, but the forest wasn't the same. The trees closed in tighter, their branches grabbing at my clothes, tugging me backward. I could feel the presence of something massive, something old and cruel, lurking just beyond my sight. Every step I took seemed to carry me deeper into its grasp. Finally, I reached the edge of a ravine. The ground sloped downward sharply, and I skidded to a stop, my heart hammering. I glanced behind me. Nothing. No figure. No shadow. I took a breath, wiping the sweat from my forehead, my mind spinning with fear and confusion. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I had just been running from nothing. But as I turned back to face the ravine, my blood froze in my veins. The edge of the ravine wasn't empty. There was something there. A figure, standing motionless at the bottom. Derek. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my heart seizing with a mixture of relief and dread. I could see him clearly now, his clothes torn, his face gaunt, his eyes wide open but empty, like he wasn't really seeing anything at all. His lips parted, and he whispered, a voice so faint I could barely hear it. "It's not over." And then, without warning, he dropped. Straight down into the ravine. I screamed, rushing to the edge, but there was nothing to grab onto. No way to reach him. The sound of his body hitting the bottom echoed up to me, but there was no blood, no sound of bones breaking. Just nothing. I stood frozen at the edge of the ravine, my heart racing, the terror gripping me like an iron vice. I knew something was wrong. I knew something had changed. And it wasn't just Derek. I could feel it. The forest wasn't just watching me anymore. It was waiting, waiting for me to come closer, waiting for me to make a mistake. And I knew then, I wasn't just looking for Derek anymore. I was looking for a way to survive. I stood there at the edge of the ravine, my mind racing with disbelief. The space around me felt oppressive, as if the very air had turned to lead. My heart thudded in my chest, and my legs trembled beneath me. What had just happened? Derek had been standing there, his eyes wide and empty, his voice barely a whisper. And then he just dropped. No scream. No struggle. As if he had been nothing more than a puppet with its strings cut. But there was no time to stand there and wonder. I had to move. I had to get out of there. I took one last, lingering look at the ravine below, hoping, wishing that maybe, just maybe, Derek would rise again. But there was nothing, just the cold, empty space. Stretching out beneath the dark canopy of trees, I spun around and bolted, my breath shallow and panicked. I needed to find a way out of the forest, to escape whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. But the deeper I went, the more everything around me seemed to shift. The trees, the ground, the air, it all warped. As though the forest was alive, moving and breathing, changing to trap me. Every direction I took led to more confusion. The trees seemed to rearrange themselves, paths disappearing into thick underbrush, as if the forest itself was closing in on me. I wasn't imagining it. The forest was watching. I could feel eyes on me, millions of them, hidden in the shadows just out of sight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see the twisted woman or Derek's empty gaze staring back at me. But there was nothing, just the forest. And then I heard it, a low hum, barely perceptible at first, like the sound of an ancient machine turning on. The hum was joined by a rustling, a soft whisper in the wind. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze in place, straining to hear. "He's waiting." The voice. It was the same whisper I had heard earlier, the one from the woman in the clearing. But now it was different. The voice wasn't just a warning, it was a command. I turned around slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, something from the corner of my eye. But as I focused, I realized it wasn't a shadow at all. It was Derek, or what was left of him. His skin was pale and stretched tight over his bones, his eyes hollow and wide. His clothes were torn to shreds, as though he had been wandering the forest for weeks. But it was the way he moved that made my stomach turn. He wasn't walking like a person. He was gliding, his feet barely touching the ground. His lips parted, but there was no sound, no words, only the hollow silence of the forest. My legs screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. My body refused to obey. The figure in front of me began to move closer, its form shifting, distorting. As it came closer, I saw the truth. Derek wasn't just lost. He had changed. Something had taken him. Something had twisted him into that. His mouth stretched open unnaturally, revealing a darkness inside, a deep void that seemed to pull at everything around it. It wasn't just an empty mouth. It was like the very essence of the forest had taken form inside him. Something ancient and monstrous, waiting to devour everything in its path. Come closer. The words were clear now, echoing in my mind. I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. No, I whispered. No, no. But Derek's empty eyes stared at me with something like pity. Or was it hunger? And then, as if in response to my defiance, the darkness inside his mouth seemed to swell, the shadows twisting and reaching toward me. I stumbled backward, the ground beneath my feet slick with mud. The trees around me seemed to move, their branches reaching out like hands, clawing at my skin. Suddenly, I felt it, a hand, cold and clammy, wrapping around my wrist. I didn't have to look to know it was Derek's hand. The fingers were twisted and wrong, too long and too sharp. His grip was like iron, pulling me forward. The forest was pulling me in. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the woods. My world narrowed to the hollow eyes of Derek, the twisting branches, the dark mouth that was pulling me closer. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. And then, as the darkness reached for me, something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free from his grip, throwing myself to the ground. My hands scrambled at the dirt, my fingers grasping at anything that would give me leverage. In a burst of adrenaline, I pushed myself up and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every step felt like the forest was closing in tighter around me. The shadows grew longer, more oppressive, and the air grew colder. The hum in the distance was louder now, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to come from deep underground. It was like the forest itself was alive, breathing, shifting. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. Suddenly, there was a crack of light up ahead. The trees thinned out, and I saw it. The road that led back to the campsite. The road that I had been trying to reach since the very beginning. I ran toward it, faster than I had ever run in my life. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my body screamed in protest. But I couldn't stop, not now. And as I broke through the trees and onto the road, I thought I was free. But the moment my foot hit the pavement, I heard it, a voice. Soft, almost too soft to hear. It's not over. And I knew. The forest had followed me. I stood at the edge of the road, gasping for air. The weight of my frantic escape still pressing down on me. My heart was racing in my chest, and my limbs trembled as though I had run miles, instead of just breaking through the tree line. The road should have been a relief. It should have been the sign that I was free. But as I stood there, staring at the empty, winding path before me, I realized that something felt wrong. The air was thick, suffocating, and the world around me seemed muted, dull. The trees that had once surrounded the forest now felt distant, yet ominously close. The road stretched out in front of me, empty and silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was part of the same nightmare. I wanted to believe I was free. I wanted to feel the rush of relief that came with the knowledge that I had finally escaped. But I knew better. It wasn't over. It never would be. The hum, that low, vibrating sound, was still there, faint but ever present, echoing through the ground beneath my feet. It seemed to come from all around me, as though the very earth had absorbed the forest its horrors. I could feel it in my bones. The forest was still with me. It was waiting, and it was getting closer. I took a tentative step forward, my eyes darting around. The road ahead seemed endless, as if it stretched out into some faraway abyss. There were no cars, no signs of civilization, no way of knowing if I was walking towards safety or into something far worse. The night was cold, colder than it should have been. The chill seeped into my skin, settling in my bones. My breath came out in visible clouds, and the wind howled through the trees behind me, carrying with it a whisper. Come back. I flinched, my mind reeling. That voice, it was the same voice I had heard in the forest, only now it was clear. It wasn't just a whisper in the wind. It was a command. You can't leave. I shook my head, backing away from the road. I had to keep moving. I had to get away from this place. But every time I took a step backward, it felt like the world closed in on me. The shadows, the trees, the whispering wind, they were all drawing nearer. There was nowhere to go. No escape. I turned back to face the road and started walking, my steps slow and hesitant. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, the pavement beneath me feeling less like a solid surface and more like quicksand, pulling me into something dark and unnatural. And then I saw it. A figure at the edge of the road, just barely visible in the dim light. A silhouette standing motionless in the distance. My stomach dropped. It was Derek, or what was left of him. The same twisted, pale figure. His face hollow and stretched, eyes wide and lifeless. He stood still, staring directly at me, his lips parted as though he was trying to speak, but no words came. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from him, but my legs wouldn't move. The fear was paralyzing. My body was locked in place, frozen by some unseen force. And then the darkness shifted. It wasn't just Derek now. Figures began to appear around him, emerging from the shadows of the trees. Twisted versions of the people I had known, faces distorted and wrong, eyes empty and vacant. They weren't human anymore. They were things. I tried to step back, my body moving like it was underwater, slow and cumbersome. But every step felt like a violation of my very soul. It was as though the forest was pulling me into itself, dragging me back to where it had all started. And then, just as I was about to turn and run, the voice came again. You can't escape. The words were clear now, resonating deep in my chest, vibrating through my very core. There was no way out, no way to run. I was caught. Trapped in this nightmare, and the only thing left was to face whatever it was that had been hunting me all this time. And then, the ground beneath me cracked open. It was slow at first, a faint tremor in the earth, but then it grew louder, more violent. The road splintered and split, the concrete shattering like glass. My heart raced as I tried to move, but the earth was pulling me down, swallowing me whole. I could feel it, an overwhelming force, an ancient presence that was reaching from beneath the earth. Something was rising, something old. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming in panic, but the road was no longer solid. The very ground beneath me was crumbling, and I knew. There was nothing I could do to stop it. The figures around me started to move. Slowly, deliberately. They weren't walking. They were gliding just like Derek had. They weren't human anymore. Not even close. And then, just as the darkness seemed to consume me, I heard it, the loudest sound I'd ever heard in my life. The earth split open with a deafening crack, and something began to rise from the depths. It was enormous, monstrous, something ancient, something that had been waiting for a very long time. It opened its mouth, a void of pure darkness, and the world around me screamed. And then, everything went black. I woke to a silence so complete that it felt suffocating. My head throbbed with a dull ache, as if the very air itself had pressed down on me during my unconscious state. My body felt heavy, sluggish, and when I tried to move, I realized I was lying on something cold, slick, and rough. I blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness, but the absence of light made everything around me feel as though it had been erased. I couldn't see anything. There was only the hollow blackness that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, surrounding me. Where am I? I forced myself to sit up, my breath shallow and panicked. My heart hammered against my ribs, every instinct screaming for me to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The air felt thick, almost tangible, like I could reach out and touch it. The very essence of the world had become oppressive, as though something was holding me in place. I glanced around again, but there was no change, just endless blackness. No trees, no road, no figures, no Derek. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I'm not alone. It wasn't a thought, it was a certainty. I could feel it deep in my gut, a presence. Something was watching me. Something hunger-filled and ancient. A faint sound reached my ears, soft, subtle, like a whisper carried on the wind. But the wind didn't blow here. There was no wind. It was a voice. "You're still here." The voice was deep, vibrating through the ground beneath me, familiar and alien at the same time. The sound of it slid through my bones like ice water, cold and invasive. I froze, not daring to move, not daring to breathe. "You're not supposed to leave." The ground trembled again. A low, unsettling hum that vibrated through the very air around me. I clutched my chest, the weight of the pressure growing with each passing moment. It was as though the earth itself was trying to crush me. Then the dark broke, not in the way light would break through clouds, but in a way that sent a cold shiver down my spine. The air split open like a wound, revealing an abyss beyond, a shadow so deep and vast that it seemed to devour everything in its path, and it was coming closer. From within the darkness, I saw it, the shape, a massive outline growing larger with every second. A giant, insatiable force, like a creature made of pure nothingness. I couldn't look directly at it. The sheer presence of it made my mind bend, twisting with fear and incomprehension. I could feel it pulling me in, the ground beneath me giving way like sand, drawing me into its gaping maw. I have to get out. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling, but it was like the world itself was falling apart beneath me. The shadows stretched out from all sides, swallowing up everything in their reach. The air was suffocating, the earth trembling, as though it too was aware of the threat that was approaching. And then I saw it. A figure, or something that resembled a figure. Derek. His skin was a grotesque shade of gray, stretched thin over his bones, his eyes black and empty. He was standing at the edge of the abyss, staring at me with an expression that was both familiar and wrong. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel its gaze locking onto me, pulling me further into the darkness. "Help me," I whispered, not even sure if I was speaking to him or to the void itself. But Derek didn't answer. Instead, his eyes seemed to widen with a silent scream, his form flickering as though it was made of smoke, dissolving into the shadows that had swallowed him whole. The ground beneath me split open again, this time more violently, tearing into the earth like the skin of an animal being gutted. The blackness surged up around me, the air thick with the scent of decay, and I knew that whatever was coming from the abyss had no interest in letting me go. I staggered back, my legs unsteady, but the force of the pull grew stronger. The earth itself was trying to drag me into the void. The ground cracked and split beneath me, sending shockwaves through my body. Then, from within the abyss, a sound, louder now, impossible to ignore, a scream, a horrible, guttural scream that seemed to echo from every direction. It wasn't a human scream. It was something far worse. I turned to run, but the ground had already given way beneath me. I was falling through the blackness, the walls of the abyss closing in around me like a mouth. There was no escape. I tried to scream, but the darkness choked the sound from my throat. Then I heard it again, the voice. You will never leave. And then, nothing. The fall seemed endless. I tumbled through the void, spinning wildly, as though I was caught in a whirlwind of pure blackness. My body was weightless, lost in an abyss that swallowed time and space. The silence around me was deafening, as if the world had been erased. I tried to scream again, but my mouth felt sealed, my voice swallowed by the darkness. I reached out, grasping at the nothingness, but there was no ground to touch, no solid surface to cling to. Only emptiness. How long had I been falling? Seconds. Hours. Time had lost all meaning. The sensation of falling stretched on, but there was something else, an odd presence in the air around me, a pressure, like something watching me, studying my every movement. I couldn't explain it, but it felt as though the very darkness itself was alive, conscious, waiting for me to break. Then I hit something. The shock was like a bolt of electricity shooting through my body. For a moment, the world spun, and I lost my breath. My chest felt heavy, as though a weight had been placed on top of me. I gasped for air, but it felt as though I was breathing through water. The ground was soft, damp, like wet earth. I blinked, slowly opening my eyes, expecting more of the same oppressive darkness. But this was different. I was lying on the floor of what appeared to be some sort of cave. The walls around me were jagged, coated with moss and fungi that emitted an eerie, faint glow, casting a sickly green light across the cavern. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, echoing off the walls in a rhythmic pattern. The air was thick, carrying a faint, metallic scent like blood. And in the back of my mind, a whispering voice. It wasn't a sound I could hear, but something I felt. You're here. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding as my eyes darted around the cave. The shadows seemed to shift at the edges of my vision, and I could almost make out shapes moving just out of sight. The walls around me felt alive, breathing in rhythm with my own frantic heartbeat. Something was alive in here. The voice returned, louder this time, reverberating in the stone walls. You shouldn't have come. I staggered backward, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I could feel the walls closing in, the floor beneath me shifting. The cave seemed to stretch and twist, morphing into something that defied nature. Like a living thing, pulsing and twisting with a dark energy that made my skin crawl. I turned to run, but before I could take a single step, something blocked my path. A figure, a tall, gaunt silhouette standing just beyond the glow of the fungi. It was Derek, or something that looked like Derek. His eyes were black, hollow sockets where his eyes should have been. His skin was stretched and pale, nearly translucent, as though his flesh was being drained from within. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Only a hollow, wet noise, like the gurgle of something choking on its own breath. Help me? His voice rasped, a broken whisper, like a scream trapped in his throat. I took a step back, my stomach twisting with terror. My heart felt like it was going to burst from my chest. I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. My body was frozen in place, as though the air itself had turned to stone. And then I realized something. Something that made my blood run cold. Derek wasn't the only one. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw more figures emerging from the shadows, some crawling, some standing, all gaunt, all twisted in ways that were impossible to describe. Their bodies moved unnaturally, jerking and twitching like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. I tried to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. The figures, the things, closed in around me, their hollow eyes following my every move, their mouths opening wider, as though they were preparing to devour me whole. I could feel the darkness closing in again, like the cave itself was drawing me deeper into its depths. There was no way out. The ground beneath me trembled, a low rumble echoing through the walls of the cavern. The whispers grew louder, turning into a chorus of voices, all chanting the same thing, over and over. "You're ours." I turned toward the cavern's mouth, but it had vanished. There was no escape. Only more shadows, more figures, more twisted forms, closing in from every side. My breath became shallow, my pulse erratic, as I realized the horrible truth. This place wasn't a cave. It was a prison, and I was never meant to leave. The suffocating air around me seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the whispers growing louder, becoming clearer. The voices, so many voices, were no longer a faint murmur in the distance. They were all around me, surrounding me, filling my ears with a maddening cacophony.
"You're ours."
"Come closer. Stay with us." I stumbled backward, my hands shaking as I reached for something, anything to hold on to. The walls of the cavern seemed to shift and sway, stretching impossibly wide and then narrowing, like they were alive, breathing with some unholy rhythm. The ground beneath me was soft, like wet clay, but I couldn't see it properly. The faint green glow from the moss on the walls cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and twist in the corners of my vision. The figures, those twisted, soulless beings, moved closer, their eyes empty and dark. Their mouths hung open, not in the way of normal humans, but as though they were designed to consume. They were all the same, inhuman, yet eerily familiar. I knew these faces. I knew their eyes, their forms. I knew Derek. But this Derek, this thing, was not the man I had traveled with. His skin was stretched taut, translucent in places, revealing the dark veins beneath. His eyes were wide and unseeing, black pits where life once dwelled. And his smile, it was grotesque, an expression of something far older and far more malicious than anything human. "Help me?" The word was barely a breath, a rasping whisper that came from somewhere deep within his throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare. But my body refused to cooperate. My legs frozen in place as the horror before me unfolded. I could feel the presence of something greater, something even darker, lingering just beyond the figures that surrounded me. I turned toward the cavern's farthest corner, where the shadows seemed to gather more densely. There, I saw it. A shape, a figure, standing still and motionless. It was her, the woman, the one who had appeared before us earlier on the trail. Her pale face was expressionless, her black eyes staring straight into mine. She didn't move, didn't speak, but the weight of her gaze pressed down on me like a physical force. Something inside me snapped. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Instead, I turned and bolted, my legs finally moving as I ran, blindly, through the cavern, crashing through the soft, shifting earth beneath my feet. The walls loomed overhead, twisted and grotesque, closing in on me with every step I took. The voices followed, relentless, a swirling chorus of agony and despair. I didn't know where I was going. All I could think was escape. The woman's face haunted my every step, and behind me, I could hear the faint shuffle of footsteps, slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. I ran faster, heart hammering in my chest, lungs burning with each breath. The cavern seemed to stretch on forever, no end in sight, no way out. And then I reached it, a wall, a massive stone wall, smooth and impenetrable, blocking my way forward. There was no exit, no escape. I turned around, gasping for air, my mind racing. The shadows were closing in, the figures circling around me, their faces still hauntingly familiar. Derek's twisted form, his hollow eyes following me, moving closer. The woman's gaze locked onto mine from the distance. They were all coming for me. I backed up against the wall, my heart pounding in my chest as the air around me seemed to thicken, suffocating me. I could feel the cold touch of fear creeping up my spine, tightening my throat. The voices spoke again, their words more distinct now, sharp and cutting. You belong to us now. My eyes scanned the cavern one last time, searching for some way out, some hidden path, some glimmer of hope. But there was nothing. Only the endless, oppressive darkness closing in around me. The ground beneath my feet trembled once again, stronger this time. And then, with a deafening roar, the wall behind me cracked. A deep fissure split open the stone, and from within, something began to crawl out. It was something else. Something that couldn't be described in words. It was a mass of writhing shadows, an amalgamation of darkness and distorted forms. Tendrils of black smoke reached toward me, and I felt the air grow cold, a biting chill that sank deep into my bones. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey, paralyzed by the sheer terror of what was before me. The shadows reached for me, their cold fingers brushing against my skin. And then, just as it seemed I would be swallowed whole, I heard it, a sound, a voice, not from the shadows, but from deep within my mind. You don't belong here. The voice was low, guttural, filled with an ancient power. It was unlike anything I had heard before, and yet it resonated within me like a familiar call. For a brief moment, the shadows hesitated. The figures, the twisting mass of darkness, paused in their pursuit. And then I understood. I was not meant to be here. I didn't belong to this place, to this nightmare. The shadows had no claim on me, but it was too late. The darkness lunged forward, consuming me in one swift motion. The last thing I felt was the cold, suffocating grip of the void closing around me. And then, nothing. The first thing I felt was cold. Ice cold. It wasn't the familiar chill of night air or the biting frost of a winter storm. It was a cold that seemed to come from within, creeping beneath my skin, burrowing deep into my bones. It wasn't just physical. It was as if the very essence of my being had been frozen, trapped in an eternal state of numbness. I couldn't see anything. There was no light, no shapes, no shadows. Just an unyielding blackness that seemed to stretch on forever, an endless void that consumed everything, including my thoughts. For a moment, I thought I was dead. But then I felt something. A pulse, a vibration that rippled through the air, reverberating deep in the silence. It was faint at first, like the hum of a distant storm, but it grew louder with each passing second. And then the whispers came again. They were softer now, more distant, but no less haunting. They slid into my ears, curling around my mind like cold fingers, prying into my thoughts, stirring my memories. The voices had changed, no longer demanding or cruel. Instead, they were pleading, desperate, as if they were reaching out to me for help. Help us. You can't leave. You belong here. The words made no sense, swirling together in a dizzying spiral of confusion. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. It was as if the air itself had thickened, suffocating me, pressing against my chest with the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. I tried to push the voices away, tried to force myself to remember where I had come from. But the more I struggled, the more I was pulled deeper into this void. The blackness around me seemed to expand, as if it were alive, as if it were conscious of my every move. And then, just as I thought I would lose my mind completely, a light appeared. It was small at first, a mere flicker in the distance. But it grew brighter, stronger, like the first star at dusk, slowly burning through the oppressive dark. I reached out to it, my body still frozen, but my mind screaming for release, for something, anything, that could pull me out of this nightmare. The light wasn't warm, not like the comforting glow of a campfire. It was cold, harsh, and sharp, like the light of a distant star that had been burning for eons, casting its brilliant light into the endless blackness of space. But it was something. It was a way out. I moved toward it, or at least I tried. The sensation of movement was strange. My limbs felt heavy, as if they were made of stone, but I kept pushing forward. Each step felt like an eternity, like I was wading through deep, viscous water. Every inch of progress came with a cost. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was there. The light surrounded me, engulfing me, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I felt warmth. It was like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the open air of dawn, the first rays of sunlight touching my skin after a night of terror. But then something changed. The warmth disappeared. The light flickered, dimming like a candle on the verge of being snuffed out. It wasn't real. I could feel it now, feel the illusion unraveling. The fragile thread that held this moment together snapping under the weight of something darker. The light began to twist, to spiral, and in its place, a figure emerged. A shadow, dark and formless, with glowing eyes that burned with an unnatural fire. It hovered in front of me, its shape shifting and warping, flickering in and out of focus, as if it was caught between worlds. And then, with a voice that shook the very foundation of my being, it spoke. "You cannot escape." The words were like thunder, reverberating through my skull, rattling my thoughts. I wanted to run, to escape, but the light had already vanished, leaving me alone with this thing. "You are ours now," the voice continued, its tone growing colder, more insistent. "You will never leave this place. You will never see the world again." My heart pounded in my chest, the fear almost paralyzing me. The figure loomed closer, its eyes narrowing, burning with an intensity that threatened to consume me. I didn't know what it was, or how I had gotten here. But I knew one thing: it wasn't the same place I had been. It wasn't the same as before. This was something different. The darkness was alive here, and it wanted me. And in that moment, as the shadow reached for me, I understood the truth. This wasn't some nightmare. This was a prison. A prison without walls. A prison that stretched into eternity. And no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to escape it. But I had to try. I had to try. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and I was frozen in place, my body too afraid to move. The figure, this shadow that had once seemed formless and distant, was now right in front of me, its glowing eyes burning into mine with an intensity I could feel deep in my soul. It was no longer a mere shape, it was something far worse. It was alive. It was something ancient, something that had existed far longer than I had, and it was fully aware of me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My legs were as heavy as stone, and my body felt like it was submerged in water, struggling to break free, but never managing to get enough traction to move. I could feel the presence of this thing all around me, closing in with an inevitable suffocation. "You cannot escape." It whispered again, its voice a low hum that vibrated through my chest. It wasn't just a voice. It was a sensation. An aura that made the hairs on my arms stand on end and a deep, primal fear twist in my gut. "You will never leave this place." The voice insisted, its tone colder, more menacing now, as if it were savoring my terror. I felt myself gasp for air, but there was none to be found. The emptiness around me seemed to swallow every sound I made, leaving nothing but silence, a silence so thick it choked me. There were no stars, no moon, no glimmer of light beyond the oppressive blackness. The cold was no longer just a sensation. It was an oppressive weight pressing down on me from all sides, holding me in place, forcing me to confront this thing. In my mind, I could still hear the whispers. The voices that had once pleaded for help, the ones that seemed to have drawn me into this nightmare, had now gone silent. There was only the shadow now, the darkness that clung to everything, hiding every escape, every path, every hope. "Why?" I managed to choke out, the words barely forming on my lips. "Why me?" The shadow didn't answer immediately. Instead, it tilted its head, as if considering the question, as if my words somehow amused it. Then, finally, it spoke, its voice like the rustling of leaves in a long, forgotten graveyard. "You are not the first," it said. "You are not the first to wander into this place. You are not the first to think you could escape." A shiver ran down my spine, It wasn't the cold that did it. No, it was the implication. Others had been here. Others had tried to leave. The thought was like a hammer to my chest. How many others? How long had they been trapped here, caught in this void of endless darkness, their bodies mere echoes in the silence? The shadow leaned in closer, its eyes narrowing with an almost predatory gleam. "And you won't be the last," it added. "You are nothing more than a fleeting memory, a whisper in the abyss." A feeling of deep despair washed over me, threatening to drown me. I wanted to fight back, to resist, to scream, to claw my way out of this nightmare, but it was all too much. The void, the shadows, the crushing weight of it. There was nowhere to go, no way out. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to block out the darkness. But even that couldn't stop the suffocating silence that pressed in on me from all sides. My mind raced. I thought of the camping trip, the laughter of my friends, the fire, the sense of freedom we had shared as we sat beneath the stars. How did it all go so wrong? And then, without warning, something changed. I felt the ground shift beneath me. A strange pulse rippled through the air, and for a brief moment, the suffocating blackness seemed to loosen its grip. I blinked, my vision clearing for just a second. And in that fleeting instant, I saw something. A door. A door faintly glowing, just at the edge of my vision. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this was my chance. The shadow still lingered nearby, but I couldn't let it stop me. I couldn't let it claim me. The door was my way out, the only path that led back to the world I once knew. With what little strength I had left, I pushed myself forward, forcing my legs to move, feeling the resistance of the blackness trying to pull me back. The whispers grew louder again, the voices shrieking in my ears, but I blocked them out. I didn't have time to listen to them. I couldn't afford to be distracted. The door was right there. I stumbled forward, my legs shaking beneath me, my heart pounding in my chest. The closer I got to the door, the more desperate the pull of the shadows became. It was like trying to run through thick tar. Each step a struggle against the suffocating grip of this void. And then I reached it. My hand reached out, trembling as I grasped the handle. It was cold. Colder than anything I had ever felt before. But I didn't care. I had to get out. I yanked the door open, and there was nothing. A hollow emptiness greeted me beyond the door. And in that instant, I realized that it wasn't a way out. It was a trap. The shadow had lured me in with the illusion of escape, only to leave me with yet another empty void. I screamed, but no sound escaped my mouth. I tried to pull away, but the darkness closed in around me, devouring everything, suffocating me once more. And then, in the distance, I heard something else. A voice I recognized. It was mine. I'll never go camping again. The darkness swallowed me whole. For a long time, I drifted in that endless void, lost in the suffocating weight of the silence and the crushing absence of everything I once knew. There were no stars, no sounds. Just the feeling of something watching, waiting, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. I tried to scream again, but no sound came. My body felt numb, frozen in place, as if the very act of trying to move had become impossible. The terror I felt before had transformed into something far worse, a sense of utter, paralyzing helplessness. The whispers returned, but they were different now. They weren't the soft, pleading voices I had heard earlier. These were darker, filled with an indescribable malice. They circled around me, like a swarm of insects, too fast for me to grasp. Each voice spoke in a language I couldn't understand, and yet it felt familiar, as though I had heard it all before. I could feel them, the others, all around me. They had once been like me, lost, desperate to escape, but now they were just echoes. Forgotten fragments of something that no longer mattered. And then, through the madness, through the chaos of whispers and cold, one voice broke through. My voice. I'll never go camping again. It echoed, a hollow repetition of words I had spoken long ago. The sound was familiar but detached, like a memory that no longer belonged to me. I felt my body move again. It was slow at first, like my limbs were made of lead, but gradually I began to regain some control. I opened my eyes, or at least I think I did. I wasn't sure if I had eyes anymore. Everything was so dark, so alien, but I could feel the weight of my body, the chill of the air, the pressure of the emptiness pressing in on me. The door that had promised escape was now just a fading memory. It no longer existed in this place. The shadows had swallowed it whole. I was back in the void, with nothing but the suffocating presence of it around me. The shadow. The thing that had followed me, that had claimed my friends, that had been here long before I ever stepped into the forest. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But there was no escape. There was only the endless void and the voices, so many voices, reminding me of the truth. I would never leave. I tried to remember the world outside, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of friends, the campfire flickering in the distance. But those memories were fading, like a dream slipping away as I woke up. The shadow was all that remained, a constant, unyielding presence in this place. There was no way out. And then, just as I thought I might lose myself completely to the despair, I heard something else. A sound, faint at first, but growing louder. Footsteps. I turned, desperate, my breath coming in ragged gasps. There, just at the edge of the darkness, I saw a figure. It was humanoid, but the shape seemed distorted, twisted in a way that made my stomach churn. I couldn't see its face, but I knew that it was one of them. One of the lost. One of the others who had been trapped here before me. It stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, each step echoing in the void. "You're not alone," the figure said, its voice rough, raspy. It was a voice I didn't recognize, but it sounded like a warning, like a plea. "There's no escape." The words hung in the air, thick with dread. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. There was no point. No reason. The figure stepped closer, its shape becoming more defined, more real, and yet somehow less human. I could feel it now, the presence of others around me, lost souls. Trapped here for eternity. They were all around me, but none of them could help. None of them could ever leave. The footsteps grew louder, and then, suddenly, I understood. The shadow wasn't just one entity. It was a cycle. A never-ending cycle of torment, feeding off the fear of those who stumbled into its grasp. Once it had claimed someone. It didn't release them. It recruited them. It made them a part of this endless void. I was just another whisper now. Another lost soul. I'll never go camping again. And then, like the final breath of a dying man, the words faded into the darkness. The cycle had begun again.